I'm going to go over the theory of mind, or the model of the mind, as it's more probably commonly known in this part of the world, or the mind model. It's a great thing to observe or look at, so that they understand on a more holistic kind of terminology of what the mind is and how the mind works. It's definitely not very sort of absolutely definitive. You could talk about this for hours on end, but it's a very kind of basic framework to gain some kind of understanding of what the mind is, how it works, these different components, how they interplay with each other. And so it's easier to explain the mind by breaking it up into certain parts and different components, but to always think of it as one coherent unit. And I'll just go through it here now. It's a good idea maybe to take a wee bit of paper or pull out your phone, open up the notes app, and if there's any questions, anything that you'd like more clarity on, if you do choose to go and see someone for a bit of mind coaching, a bit of mindset work, certain feelings that people are having, resolving traumas and things like that, it's very, very, very powerful to do that. And believe it or not, people that can be in sort of agony over these things for years and years can be resolved. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen things happen in my own life. I'm very passionate about it. Just humans altogether now. I'm just fascinated. I think we underestimate how sort of good we are. It's fascinating. So I'll just get straight on it. Please do, any questions, write them down. The reason why I say write them down is you can either send an email or right underneath wherever you see this video. But if you're going to see someone else, it's good to get their sort of point of view, how they maybe see it, and you might get another understanding or another insight that you wouldn't have got here. But typically, if you go and see someone you haven't maybe seen before or spoke with before, there's only so much that can happen in a very short space of time. And sometimes we forget actually some of the things that maybe that we were going to ask, and it's good just to have something tangible there to say, oh, I was meant to actually talk a wee bit about this. And you may find that most of the answers will be answered through this video, or just by sitting down one-to-one, sitting with somebody and just exploring things in a very nice, just a very safe, non-judgmental place. Explore what's going on, and hopefully this will give a better insight to the mechanics behind it. And let me know any feedback. So, as I say, I call it the model of the mind. There is other words for it. If you YouTube it or Google it, there'll be different sort of theories on it, things like that. This resonates a lot with me. Some people call it there's a two-part, so a conscious and unconscious, or just a conscious and a subconscious. For me personally, I can see how it can be sort of three parts, and I'll explain that now. I'll actually go into a wee bit now the unconscious mind. It may not just be relevant through the rest of the video, as it goes about effect and change, which it can be done on a very unconscious level, but unconscious is talking about, from this sort of point of view, is that part of the mind that you're pre-programmed with, that you're born with. So the day you're born, or how you're born, or how you develop in the womb, your genetic code, that intelligence that looks after your heart rate, that organizes the digestive systems, that knows what proteins and amino acids to release to digest food. Like it's an incredibly complex part of the mind, compared even to the other kind of parts of the mind. It's incredibly intelligent, incredibly sort of self-sufficient. It's, if you were to say it had a motivation or an intention, I would describe it as that part of the mind that is organized in such a way to help the heart to keep beating for as long as possible, the lungs to keep breathing for as long as possible until you take your last breath. But it's basically the framework, the data that's there that affects your sort of genetic makeup, and how you're sort of pre-programmed or pre-wired to come onto the planet. So that's more or less the unconscious mind. So that's even things like your thyroid glands and things like that. So how things are released, and if there's an imbalance there, typically through the likes of hypnosis, generally there's not very great results that way. But it's not to say that that you can't work on it and do things yourself for it. I'm a great I just see and hear so many incredible stories of what people are able to do for themselves, and it can be through things like just changing the diet slightly, or changing how they think about things or how they feel about things, and other sort of aspects of how they recreate themselves. It's incredibly powerful. But as I say, we'll not touch too much on it anymore. But we'll talk about the conscious mind a bit, and the conscious mind would be more your day-to-day mind. So it's where we spend most of our time. It's that sort of mind that helps you get from A to B. When you wake up in the morning, yes, I'm here, this is who I am, today I've got XYZ on, and this is how I'm going to do XYZ. And so that's more your conscious mind. It's very analytical, very logic based, very rational, reasonable, and it's a very, very useful part of the mind. I wouldn't necessarily run it down. You have a thing called short-term memory there. It's an incredible piece of kit. It's very good for planning, goal setting, reverse engineering things, and it's a very key important part of our life, especially in sort of the Western world. It's fascinating. As in sort of mind power, as in if you were to sort of say how strong-minded it is compared to other parts of the mind, if you were to look at, some people would see images of the mind and they would see the conscious mind being the tip of the iceberg, and then the subconscious or unconscious then would be the bottom half of the iceberg. So not only is there more depth, the subconscious part, but the conscious part wouldn't be as strong, if you like, or as influential in sort of habitual kind of habits and things like that. It is more or less the analytical, how do I get from A to B, or if I have a problem here, how do I resolve and get to where I want to be here. But it's a fascinating part. I'll talk about a few of the main kind of parts of this part of the mind, and sort of their benefits, and we'll move then onto the subconscious. And so it's your analytical mind, as I said. It makes all the micro decisions in a day, things that you wouldn't necessarily class as a decision. And so it would be things like, what toothpaste will I use? Will I floss today? Do I want a cup of tea or do I want coffee? It's small micro decisions. What will I wear? That's a very good one, as in the sense of, if you look at some people in the world, they would say, if you look at the likes of Simon Cowell, would be a very good example. White t-shirt, high-waisted trousers, the same kind of outfit from day to day. Who else? Steve Jobs of Apple, the same kind of guy, the turtleneck kind of jumper, and same kind of thing, high-waisted kind of trousers, or a pair of jeans and a pair of sneakers, or runners as they call them. And the idea there is that there's less decisions to be made. So when they get up in the morning, if they've got all the same kind of clothes in the wardrobe, it's very easy, just as long as it's clean, fresh, put it on, and then just shoot out the door. Whereas if you imagine how many decisions you would make if you stood in front of your wardrobe every day and said, well, will I wear these shoes with these trousers, or will I wear a skirt with these skirt, and what kind of top will I wear? There's loads of small decisions being made even before you leave the bedroom. And so that's the analytical mind. It'll analyse things, it'll look at things and break things apart and rearrange and play about with them. And it's very important to do that. But there's a lot of things, like as it says in the slide there, should I open the door, should I turn the tap on, should I tie my shoelaces, or should I tuck them in? We would say or imagine that these things are very automatic, but the truth of it is, if you really break it down, there's a choice being made. And it analyses and weighs up the benefits very quickly. Should it be done this way, or should it be done that way? So another part of the mind would be classed as the willpower. So as you can see, the brain there holding up the weights, and it's not to say the brain is the brain is the mind. It's certainly the processor of it, but the mind is even the body as well. But as willpower is, there's the set of weights getting lifted and held up and up and up. But at some point, even the strongest man in the world, at some point will have to let that go. And willpower is a bit like that. It will push you so far, but then at some point it sort of gets tired and fatigued, and then it retreats. And it is a bit like a muscle, in the sense that you can create a lot of tension on it, and then it relaxes it down as well. And you would see that with people that are very strong willpower, working with the likes of their diets or quitting smoking or working with their habits. It's very exhausting as well, on a mental kind of sphere of things. Pushing past, really going against the grain. That's kind of what willpower is. Willpower is sort of designed to do things that are slightly inconvenient, but the benefit weighs up in the sense that you'll have more energy at the end of it. So maybe an example would be, it might be a silly example, but it gives you roughly the idea, and it can be, imagine that you are about to put out a cup of tea or coffee and you realise that you have no milk. You look outside and you can see that it's raining. It's not raining overly heavy, and you're just wearing a wee pair of shoes, very light clothes on you, but you know the shop's only maybe 3 or 4 doors up from where you live. And so rather than go and get the right kind of shoes on or put on maybe heavier clothing and a raincoat, it might just be as easy and simple to lift the 1 or 2 pound that might be sitting on the worktop and going out the door and quickly dashing up the street, getting into the shop. Even you know it's a bit cold, the wind's sticking to you, the rain's really coming down and your face is getting clenched up. Your hair might be getting a bit wet, but it's worth that slight pain rather than the whole effort of doing everything else to have done it kind of right just for them 2 seconds to go to the shop. A more extreme kind of example could be, you could see maybe a burning building or something like that, and you can see that there's something sort of hazardous near the building and it's running over and taking that away. So it could be anything, could be a pet, could be a small child, it could be anything, but you would risk that, you would push past the normal sort of boundaries of your day-to-day sort of routine, and you would just push through it and then retract back, let it go, relax, everything's okay again. It's not really ideal for the likes of diets and smoking and things like that, although willpower is a great sort of tool or a muscle to build on. It is a muscle that can be built on, but the effect change like that, it's very unlikely that when people do sort of work really well with their diets or with quitting smoking or breaking a habit, there's usually another element at play at the same time that helps affect that change, and I'll talk about it a wee bit more later on. And so another part of this conscious kind of part of the mind is your working memory. So working memory is your day-to-day memory. And so if you would think on your phone, a smartphone, and opening up, so imagine you had 40 apps on your phone and you had maybe 35 of them open, and so over time will all them tabs open, or you could even think about it, all the tabs on the browser on a computer, if you've Chrome open and you've all these different tabs open for all these things that you have to do, there's a lot going on and it slows down the computer, and it would slow down the phone. And it's the same thing for like a person in a mind. And the conscious mind, there's a certain capacity that it has, a working memory to allow these tabs to be open, your attention to be on these different things at the one time. And it does get fatigued, it does kind of slow up. People would even get like a tension headache. Some people would describe that they just feel very fuzzy and clustered. Some people then really benefit then from actually having a quick power nap. What a power nap does, even the sequence of actually going into a sleep, actually sort of clears that kind of part of the mind and opens that up a bit. And for other people that actually maybe have a list of things to do in a day, or that have a certain amount of tabs open, so for some people they may go into work and they would open up all the tabs that they need to do in the morning, that they need to have done by the end of the day, and they just close them down as the day goes on. And actually the sense of relief that's experienced as each one is down, it's sort of like a reward or a feeling of satisfaction, and that sort of clears that part of the mind and gives more space to focus on the other tasks. And again, with that decision fatigue as well that I was chatting about earlier, imagine in front of a wardrobe in the morning, and every day the first thing that you do when you get up is decide what to wear, and how tiring that can be. And then thinking then how not so tiring it would be if you had an organised kind of system of, well, I'll wear maybe a certain kind of a style of an outfit every day of the week when I'm working, or when I'm just relaxing about the house, I have a certain kind of like a sleep suit or something like that I would wear. It makes them decisions not as hard because there's not as many decisions going on. You're not thinking what shoes am I going to wear with that, it's either A or B. So I might wear brown shoes with this outfit today, and tomorrow I'll wear a similar outfit, same kind of colour scheme, but I might just wear black, or I might wear pair of Converse or something with it. And so that's sort of the working memory of the mind. Another part of this mind would be what's known as a critical factor. The best way to describe it is it's kind of like a filter between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And so I'll talk a bit more when I'm talking about the subconscious mind. But for now, just think about it as a filter or a sieve between the conscious and the subconscious, or a gateway. And now we'll just talk a wee bit about the subconscious mind. So, subconscious mind is a world of potential. It's very creative, very spatial. It's actually the opposite. It's not logical at all. It's not in any way analytical. It's full of possibilities. It's where your self-image is stored. So a self-image is sort of the image that you have of yourself. Some people work towards, when they're setting maybe a goal or an idea or visualization of how they would like their life to be, they create an image in their mind, and that's stored at a subconscious level. And that impression on the subconscious then gives that subconscious part of the mind a framework of what this person needs to live up to match that image. And so the subconscious mind tries to match that image as much as possible. And for some people it can be very difficult to change that image, but using the right kind of techniques and sort of tools, or at least an understanding or a couple of insights, then it's very easy to sort of start affect and change on that image. It's a very programmable part of your mind. It's where all your habits are. Very, very programmable. And not only is it programmable, it's reprogrammable. And so for the first 7 years of your life, most people would describe it that a child is like a sponge and they soak everything up, and that's because they're only in their subconscious mind. There's very, very little to none sort of conscious mind going on in the background. So the conscious mind doesn't really develop until over the age of 7. There's certain bits of it or qualities would flicker in and out. So you would get kids asking why, so they're starting to analyse things, they're starting to look at things and explore things, or gain an understanding. And so that can happen with some children from the age of like 2 or 3 years of age. And so that would be like a conscious quality, but it doesn't take full gear or it doesn't take over the reins until after the age of 7. There's no concept of time or space in this part of the mind. It's a wonderful part of the mind. When I say there's no time or space, it's if someone would describe themselves as really enjoying a really good book. It could be a really good novel, it could be just a really good informational book, and if you find yourself that you're really taken by the book, you're really looking into the book, really captured by the book, so much so that somebody could walk into the room in front of you and walk right past and go into the next room, and you're so engrossed in the book that you wouldn't actually be aware of somebody actually walking past you, or so engrossed in the book that you're looking at it and you've maybe read 3 or 4 chapters and you really don't want to put the book down, and you look up and you notice the time and say, gosh, I hadn't realised that so much time has passed. I can't believe that so much time has passed. For some people, when they're driving a car, would describe some days, well, how did I even get here? I don't really remember that journey that I took. And it's just because the mind is away in sort of a bit of a daydream, and it's going into like a trance state. And in these trance states, time doesn't exist and space doesn't exist. And so when I explain sort of the space side of it and time side of it together, if you think on, maybe you've smelled a fragrance that you haven't smelt for, it could be 10 or 20 years. It could be a perfume that you've got a whiff of and it reminds you instantly of something maybe your grandmother would have wore or your mother might have wore. Or maybe it was a perfume somebody had gifted to you many years ago and you just haven't smelled it in a long time. And it just takes you straight back to a memory of so long ago, and it was that the smell was the trigger for it. But it's almost like when you get that smell, there's no distance between the first time you actually smelt it and when you're actually smelling it now in the moment. Excuse me. This part of the mind is designed to sort of, based on the programming that's in it, will make us the person that we are or live up to that self-image. a really big part of this mind is memory. So I had explored with the conscious mind, I would describe it as a working memory. There's also a short-term memory there. And so what I mean by a short-term memory is, if I typically ask anybody, what time did you get up at this morning? You could recall that very, very quickly. What time you get up yesterday morning, maybe recall that very, very quickly. If I asked you maybe 3 weeks ago on a Wednesday morning, when did you get up at that time? Or 5 months ago, what about 3 years ago? What time did you typically get up on a certain specific morning? Once the memory is going back beyond a few days, especially going on to a couple of weeks, and definitely a couple of months and years, it's very difficult to recall. It takes an extra sort of moment for the mind to actually go and retrieve that information to present it. Whereas the information that it's looking to retrieve is actually in the subconscious part of the mind. It's your memory, it's not your working memory, it's your long-term memory. And so some people can look at it from the sense that from the very day that you're born, it's almost like somebody's had a wee button on the back of your mind, and this button records everything. So it's not everything that's just visual, it's everything that's been felt, things that are being impressed upon a person, how you feel by someone's kind of presence, and the impression that you get from that's all stored and recorded. Everything that you've actually smelt, everything that you've heard. The mind is taken on a super HD, high definition audio. Every sense that you have, it's taken on for every moment of every day, and it only ever is useful is whenever the mind then, as I said earlier about getting a smell. So it's like even the smell of freshly cut grass, it might take someone back to a memory from earlier on. Whereas it can also be for the protective side of things, if maybe there was a really serious incident with a young dog in early life, and so maybe somebody get nipped or bit, or really scared by a really big dog and such a small child, that impression's put on the mind takes that in and goes, oh, so anytime I see a dog now, I'm going to respond in such a way to protect myself. And usually people would retreat. They would typically be a bit more anxious. And it's curious to watch that if you see a group of people together and a dog walks into a room, and if you watch other people, everybody would have a very different kind of idea of what their perception is of that dog, even though the dog has done nothing, only simply walk in, and it could be a very playful dog, very innocent dog, very well-mannered dog. But for some people that can be very traumatic, and it's reliving at a very subconscious level, reliving an older memory of an experience that was had. And so the memory is stored for protection, and usually as a reference, so you don't have to relearn things all the time. So once you learn how to walk, the mind remembers how to do it, and it's repetitively done. How to use a computer. So when you first turn on a computer and you started working at it, it might have took a period of time before you sort of learned how to use a computer, and that's very useful for any other time you go on a computer. It's very easy to recall the information that you need to achieve the outcome that you want. So it's fascinating. It really is. You can do a thing called regression, and regression, you can help people go back in their mind on a timeline of memories, and go back to the first time that they took their first steps. And in people's experience, they're describing the scene where they can get a sense of the smell, they can get a sense of what they were hearing, and be very accurate, even though they could be sort of 1 year of age. And so even at that time, they wouldn't be able to remember or understand what was being said. And maybe the child at 1 year of age could only utter 1 or 2 words. In later life, they can sort of recall the conversation. They recall how people looked. So imagine mommy and daddy are in the room and the child's taking their first steps. They can remember what mommy and daddy looked like when maybe daddy had hair and a moustache. Mommy had colour in her hair, that kind of way. Or maybe mommy had a longer length of hair. And so the mind's very powerful like that. You can actually take back and actually sort of relive the scene as if it was happening now. And again, there's no time and space once you're in there, so it's really very real once you're in it. It's fantastic. So that's long-term memory. Now we talk about habits. So habits is the next part of the mind, of the subconscious part of the mind, that plays a really big role in people's lives. And so what a habit basically is the repetition of an action. that does a few things. It saves time, saves resources, saves energy. And if it's done on a very repetitive basis, it automizes things. So it allows the mind space to learn new things. And so this can happen when people learn to walk for the first time. It mightn't be a very good example to give sort of now, but for people maybe that could resonate with having to be rehabilitated. Maybe they've had a back injury or a knee injury and they've had to learn how to walk again. They've been through a series of physiotherapy. Maybe somebody's had a stroke. They can relate to the fact that they had to learn how to walk again, and it was very difficult to do at first. Learning the right kind of movements, where to put the right pressure in the right place, what angle to hold the foot, and how to put one foot in front of the other, and to do that repetitively. And so once that's sort of rehearsed and remembered, then what the subconscious mind can do is say, well, look, I can handle this now. I've got a good grasp on what it is you want me to do. If anything happens out of the ordinary that I haven't seen, then I'll sort of ask for sort of help. A good example to give that is when people were learning to drive a car. So when you learn to drive a car, you've got 3 pedals to look at, depending where you are. You could be two pedals and not automatic. You have your gear stick, you have wipers, you have indicators, and you have 3 different mirrors to look at. And that's very overwhelming sort of the first time, and that's why driving lessons are very powerful. They break it down, give a bit of space between each one. And it's the repetition of doing these things and remembering your position on the road. Where's the 4 wheels in relation to the curb in the centre of the road? What speed you're doing, the distance from the car in front. There's a lot of information to take in. But then at some point then the subconscious mind will say, look, well, I actually get a great grasp of this. And again, it just sort of takes it loads a program for it, and if anything out of the ordinary happens, then it sort of re-alerts the sort of people. So a good example of re-alerting is sort of subconscious mind knows that when a red light comes on in front, on a vehicle in front, that's a signal that car in front is slowing down or stopping suddenly. And so for people that may find themselves in a bit of a trance driving up the road, it's a road they've been on every day, it's maybe a long journey, and automatically, as you can see in the diagram above, there's a cue, and the cue would be the brake light comes on, and so automatically, if you're sort of daydreaming or not, the signal of the light actually coming on signals the person then to go, oh, there's something different happening here that doesn't normally happen on this stretch of the road. It's time now to come out of that routine and take a new action, and the action then is the automatic cue then, or the routine then is put the foot on the brake. And so light comes on, so that's the cue. The routine then is move from the accelerator onto the brake and take action and adjust accordingly. The reward in this case would simply be the satisfaction or the relief that everything is safe. So the unconscious mind, from its point of view, it's going to survive. Subconscious point of view, looking to sort of protect and keep people safe. There's that feeling of safety, and so that's sort of a reward for that. And that's the same thing with riding a bike. A habit can even be smoking. So smoking something that typically somebody might do when they're out drinking or when they're at work, looking for sort of smoke breaks and things like that. And there's a certain routine, there's a cue. So once I get a certain amount of work done, or it becomes a certain time of the day, so when the clock strikes sort of 12, right, it's time now that I should be looking for my cigarette, and having a wee smoke. And the same thing, the routine then is have the cigarette. And the reward then is actually, look, I've actually had it, I feel better now. Some people say that they feel very relaxed. And so, that's sort of habits covered. The emotional mind is almost a mind on its own, but it's within the realms of the subconscious. And so if you look at the word emotion, it's energy in motion. It's the best way to describe it. And so when you feel very infatuated with love and joy and happiness, you feel moved in a certain way to take action. When people feel sort of very hurt, anger would be a good one. People will go into a rage. So there's a lot of energy builds up, and it's in the system, and it needs to be pushed out in some way or form. And a lot of people actually have been taught from a very young age to actually sort of sit on certain emotions and do not express them, and that causes a lot of problems in sort of later life. You can only sort of sit on something for so long. It's almost like sitting on a volcano and plugging it in every corner where there's about to be kind of a leak, but at some point it's going to erupt. And usually that happens when people are sort of worn down, stressed, there's a few things going on in life, and there's a bit of overwhelm there. And so then the emotional mind then, it's sort of like, it's almost like that volcano's kind of weak, and so then it's going to spring out, or it's going to emerge. The conscious mind has no comprehension or understanding on the emotions. It's a different sort of world in and of themselves. It's a lot of statements I would hear from people in my own experience. If you often say something that you often regret, and even at the time of about to utter them words, there's almost like a thought coming into the head, don't do it, but yet it still comes out. And that's just that energy and that emotion is really just sort of taken over, and it needs to just be released. And there's loads of ways of actually going in and resolving certain things, especially all the repressed feelings. Even hurt, anything that's sort of been sat on, or anything that's ever bubbled up and it's sort of been pushed back down again. It's good just to get them out and they sort of just release them completely. Some people then they would experience things like stress and things like that. It's almost like a big weight that's just been lifted off their shoulders, and it's very long lasting. It's a great there's a great couple of processes there. Protective mind, it, as I say, if unconscious had an intention, that's for sort of physical survival. Subconscious mind's more the protective mind, in the sense that it keeps people safe from danger. So in the likes of a car, if there's lights coming on, there's a potential for a real danger there of an accident happening. But also in the sense of there's no difference between what's real and imagined. And so you would see people nowadays with these VR headsets, virtual reality, and they could be sitting on a certain kind of like a simulator, and it can rock them about, and on the screen that's on their eyes, and they could be wearing headphones, that they get so overwhelmed with the story that's coming at them through the visual side of things and the hearing, as well as what's going on movement wise, that it tricks the subconscious mind into thinking that maybe they're on a real roller coaster, or they really are about to jump out of an airplane. And if you watch people that are watching these videos where you see the person on the machine and they're freaking out, but or the people looking on know that it's not real and it's not happening, but to that part of the mind, it doesn't know. It's making its best guess of what information has been sent on through the senses. And if it's been really overwhelmed, kind of like a cinema experience, if you go into a cinema, the lighting's darkened down, so the focus is on the screen, and the screen is really big, so it's really immersive. The surround sounds, so even and action scenes and things like that, the sounds are coming from the various places to make it more effective. And so you may know the actor in real life, you may see things in the magazines every day or just online of things going on. They may be going through like maybe a marriage breakup, or certain life events have been happening for these actors and actresses, but yet on the screen you see the person, the person, and they're acting out a scene where they're very loved up, or acting up a really action kind of scene, and they wouldn't be in their real day-to-day life, they wouldn't be sort of seen as a real sort of action man kind of character. And so people within a very short space of time, the average movie is about 2 hours, within a very, very short space of time, having the senses overwhelmed in such a way it bypasses that conscious part of the mind, and it really lives out that scene. For some people can be very moved by going to the cinema. Some people will only go to a cinema to watch sort of comedy kind of things because they like the enjoyment of actually feeling happy, and would shy away from sort of terror movies and things like that, because it can be so believable. But its intention is to protect, and what it uses to protect is usually by feelings, and so anxiety, fear and things like that. That would, if you feel fear really strongly, then you're not going to, typically you wouldn't do what you'd be scared of doing. But there is ways of educating the mind to say, look, this situation might be like this situation, but it's not the same. It's a very lazy part of the mind, in the sense that it doesn't like to change. A big reason for that is, well, there's two sort of reasons that I can make sense of. One would be if you change your mind all the time, you'd be fairly gullible. You'd be very open. You'd be very gullible is a very strong word. Indecisive might be a better word to use. And so what it does is reinforces the beliefs that's already in there. So somebody could have a very good belief system, or a very good system where they look for the positive aspects of things. They're very grateful for things that are going on in their life. Some things that could be unimaginable going on in their life, and they still take a very kind of positive attitude. They take it in their stride. They have a very sort of good way of looking at things, or from an outside point of view, they seem to handle it very well. Even the likes of rejection and things like that, they would take a point of view where it's not personal, and that you can't take away value from. No, they have a very good sense of value in themselves. And everything that they look at, or every situation in life, they seem to take a nugget out of it or something out of it where it adds to it or reinforces that sort of that image in the mind. And then you can take somebody that would appear to be sort of very broken. They haven't a very good self-image, feeling very low, very low, very depressed, very worried about things, living in a world of fantasy, all these different scenarios playing out in their mind, and it reinforcing that sort of belief system. And so it's lazy in that sense, but there is ways to bring about that change. Another sort of reason for it too is to conserve energy. It takes a lot more effort to take on a new belief or change the way of looking at things, and so it likes to keep the status quo. But it doesn't mean that it can't happen and it can't change. There's loads of different ways to ignite change within that part of the mind. And so the art of doing that in a very deliberate way is called hypnosis. And so hypnosis is used in the likes of in everyday life. Honestly, people do it without even knowing that they're doing it. Hypnosis, as I would define it, is the art of bypassing the critical mind in a very deliberate way to enter a trance-like state. There's loads of ways to bypass this part of the mind. So as I was talking earlier about the critical factor of that filter, I'm talking about bypassing that filter. And so what that filter does on a day-to-day level, when you're in your very conscious kind of mind. In a very conscious kind of mind, you're getting from A to B, you're analytical, you're assessing everything coming in. And so information that is presented by way of a suggestion, whether it be verbal or non-verbal. And so what I mean verbal is by spoken word. Non-verbal could just be an impression, an image. Somebody could put their hand out like this as if to shake hands, and that's non-verbal. And they didn't say I'm going to shake hand, but that was a non-verbal cue. And so the mind takes this information in, and it automatically decides, should I actually shake hands back with this person or not? But everything typically is a suggestion. And so then what this critical factor does, it will assess all this information coming in, and what it will do then, it will make a judgment or a decision whether it should pass on into the subconscious mind. And so for the first 7 years of your life, you have no real choice what goes into your subconscious mind. You're open to everything. If you were born here in the UK, in Ireland, and for some reason your parents decided then to move to India, China, a very different culture, for that 1-year-old, moving to a different country would soak up the language far quicker, absorb the traditions, meld in with the food that's in the area and things like that. Very, very adaptable, very malleable, very sponge-like. And the idea is for that subconscious part of the mind, or what people generally do, is they want to fit in. You don't want to be a very vulnerable child. It depends on adults if you don't fit in, and so it will take on everything going on around it: belief systems, language, sort of the cuisine, everything that's to do with an environment. That's a very extreme example, but it can be seen. You see children all the time that are coming from a foreign country and planted anywhere in the world, and they just adapt and flourish very, very well before the age of 7. Then typically what you would notice with children sort of a bit later than that, especially teenage years, and then think about the parents that have actually done the move, or the guardian of the child that has moved to another country. It can take them 2 or 3 years before they sort of really wrap their head around the language. They would still have a bit of a culture shock, and they may never get over the sort of cuisine sort of side of things. And so what the point of me explaining that part of it is that this critical factor, or this filter, what it does is when information is presented to the filter will sort of as a bit of a judge, and it will look at the information being presented and look at it and say, well, does that match what's in the back of the mind? And it will look at the back of the mind and say, well, the subconscious mind doesn't have any sort of a good self-image when it comes to feeling good about myself, or valuing myself. And so it will reject it and it will push it back out. So it come to the filter, it will look at it, it doesn't match, and it'll throw it back out. It can be overwhelmed, and so when the mind is overwhelmed, there's a very good chance that these suggestions can actually go on and begin to affect another change. There's loads of ways past this filter, and each one of them is the art of hypnosis if it's done in a very deliberate way, to affect the change that someone desires. So when someone experiences shock, so possibly a car accident, falling down the stairs unexpectedly, some kind of an incident, maybe it could be threatening, somebody robbing you in the street, anything like that could put somebody in a shock state. And so typically anybody that's experienced shock would describe it as everything slowed down. And it's not that everything slowed down, time sort of passed the way time does, but what the mind is doing, it's literally taking that filter and throwing it away, and it's saying, well, I don't care about anything else. My survival was threatened there, like the physical vessel, as well as I wasn't safe. I didn't protect this person. So what it's doing is going through the scene very, very slowly, looking for the smallest wee thing. What could I have done to prevent this? Or is there anything that I could have picked up on that I know that I can store that now in my mind and use it if I see something very similar to that again? Shock is in a protective way too, so some very, very traumatic event can happen and the mind can actually black it out from the conscious mind and say, well, this memory is too traumatic that I don't want to remember that again or relive that again, in the sense of reliving the scene again. So time would slow down, everything's been taken on, and what's happening there is the mind then is relearning or knowing what can I do in a similar situation now that comes up. When someone's in a very emotional state, so it could be a rage, an anger, hurt, grief, any very sort of emotional state, you're very open to suggestion then. So it can reinforce what's already in there. So if it's in a hate kind of way or a very upset, angry kind of way, it can reinforce certain things and it can live for a bit longer. But it's a state where you're in a kind of a trance. Emotions is kind of like a mind on its own, but it's very, very much the subconscious part of that. Repetition of suggestions is a good way to sort of bypass that filter. So as I explained before, this filter can be overwhelmed. If there's too much information getting fired at it all the time, it has to sort of overspill and it has to kind of go on. It has to be taken on board because your subconscious mind is taking everything in and every way. Anyway. And so it's using repetition in a good way. So some people would use affirmations. Some people would look at inspirational quotes. And some people would look at them and say, no, I'm not interested in that. And that's a proper just rejecting the suggestion. Whereas if it's done in a more reflective mode, whereas you might see people on Facebook putting up a very inspirational kind of quote. Instagram is very good for that. An inspirational even kind of a book. It's taking it in, and it's instead of taking that 1 or 2 seconds to look at it and dismiss it, it can be an idea then just to look at it, maybe look at it again, and then reflect and sort of take on in a space of reflection and look at it again and sort of understand, well, is there anywhere that I can see evidence of that in my life? What is this quote really trying to say? What's the picture around it? And it's being open, is actually opening the mind to be open to that suggestion. And repetitively doing that, it's almost like you're taking a seed, you're then taking that seed, planting it on the mind, and you might have a really big tree or a big weed in the mind, and it could be it mightn't be a very great self-image, or it mightn't be some very a great bit of confidence. And so what even self-love, so someone that doesn't have a lot of sort of value in themselves. And so any of those examples, or any kind of example at all, but it's almost like planting a seed in, and that seed's very, very small, and so repetitively doing that is almost like a watering can and cultivating the soil around the seed. And the more that's done repetitively over time, it allows this seed to grow stronger and stronger and stronger. And that takes time, it's a journey. But while this part of it's actually getting stronger and stronger and building, this other part that was sort of the opposite of it, then it actually starts to shrink and shrivel and get smaller and smaller, and this one then is almost the food. This actually feeds the other one to make it blossom. And so that's where repetition is very good for sort of programming the mind as well. So repetitively learning to drive and things like that, the repetition of doing that, the subconscious mind then learns that, and it sort of runs a program then for that. Another way then is through authority figures. And so an authority figure could be a doctor, could be your GP, could be like a holy man, a priest, a reverend, whatever denomination, a teacher at school. And so the perception is that these people are very specialist in a certain place, and anything that they say is true, and it sort of bypasses that part of the mind instantly just by any suggestion that's given. And so you could imagine a scene where a doctor or a teacher, even a policeman, or if you're driving along the road and the police start coming up, the police are behind you or they're coming up beside you, all of a sudden you get very sensible again and you're driving kind of properly. It's that perceived authority that's built in with the likes of the police and things like that. But a doctor giving you sort of bad news, I would always recommend get a second opinion. Because if that belief is taken in and absorbed, it reinforces what's already in there. And so it would be great for more doctors to say there's hope, there's a bit of faith there, and if your belief system is sort of valued on hope and faith and trust and things like that, that can have a massive shift, and that's a whole different conversation altogether, going down the placebo effect road. But it's a way in, it's authority figures, even in advertising. So if you have Dwayne the Rock Johnson coming out and saying, I've got this wonderful product that I always use, it's a skincare product possibly, just for men, say, and I use this all the time, I really love this product's really, really, really good. Then if you had only seen the product on its own, and maybe an agency actor does the advertisement for it, there's no authority with it, there's no influence with it, so that wouldn't have as much of an effect on bypassing the mind as an, that would be a good idea to try that. But whenever it's somebody like The Rock, or it could be somebody like Britney Spears, then if there's a really good value or association with this person, I love this person's career, I love what this person does, it could be Oprah Winfrey, it could be anybody, and they say the same thing about that product versus somebody that's not known, then their influence alone can actually influence whether you buy it or not. And the product's still the same product, they haven't changed the product, the ingredients and all is the same, but it's the person representing that can actually bypass critical thinking and more sales being done. Storytelling is another great way of doing it. Symbolic kind of rituals, getting really involved with things that don't actually make sense, which is perfect for the subconscious because it's not logical. Then the things like rituals, storytelling is a great way to ignite change within. And so people that have a very strong belief system around sort of rituals, and a ritual is anything, people can make a ritual out of brushing their teeth in the morning, or a certain setting of furniture in a certain way in the house, if there's a belief taken on with that. I wouldn't discourage it if it's having that positive effect for somebody. And even simple silence, that reflection is a good way to sort of, as a nice gateway into that part of the mind to actually allow that space, to allow for that creative thinking to join connections and sort of resolve certain things as well. But as I say, that purely hypnosis is the art of deliberately getting into a nice trance-like state where the mind is more open, sort of a more open-minded kind of person is naturally not so much suggestive, but they would entertain ideas and make their own informed decision on it and act accordingly. Whereas somebody that would be sort of closed-minded would, even when the evidence, and it's really strong evidence, is presented to this kind of a person, then it's rejected right away. And so now I'm going to address a couple of maybe fears around sort of hypnosis. It is, some people would have a scary kind of connotation to it with regards to movies they've seen in the past and how it's portrayed in media and things like that, which is ironic. But the main one is that do I sleep when I'm on hypnosis, or am I sleeping? And I can understand where some people would imagine that or think that, because most people have their eyes closed when they're in sort of a trance. Not that that matters. You can be open. You can be in a very open trance, such as driving a car, for example. You're in a bit of a trance and you're still, your eyes are open, and it sort of would have that effect by looking at it. It's very relaxing when it's done artificially, depending on what way it's been induced. And the word hypnosis itself, hypno is Greek for sleep, and the guy James Brad that actually coined the word hypnosis, which is gnosis, simply means a process or a condition, so it's the process of sleep. The same guy actually tried to rebrand it or rename it a thing called monoideism, which is a more accurate description of that trance-like state. And so if you would consider a computer and you have maybe Google Chrome open and you've all these different tabs open, and so that would be sort of like a stereo sound, where there's stereos too, so you could be even Dolby Sound surround. There's 7.2 tabs open, and so you have all these different tabs open, or you have all these apps open on your phone. The art of hypnosis, what it's doing then, is trying to get the mind focused on the one idea, and follow that one idea through to resolve a specific thing or to achieve a certain outcome. And so sleep, as much as it can be used to help somebody sleep, in the sense that if your mind is really relaxed and your body's really relaxed, then you're in a very conscious sleep. Most people don't feel that level of relaxation consciously. People would feel very physically relaxed by sitting on the sofa or lying down watching a bit of TV, but their mind is still engaged. There's a lot still going on. Whereas the level of mental relaxation comes down to the idea that there's the thought that you're only following one thought through, and you're taking that thought on a journey to come to some kind of resolution, usually when it's used to help people. And so you're not really sleeping. Attitude is the main thing in how or well something would work for somebody. If somebody comes in with a very closed mind, I don't think this will work, then it won't work. If you think you can and you think you can't, you're right. It's as true and as simple as that. The key, the gem, the golden nugget out of anything that I've sort of said in this video is, it definitely is taking it on board, is actually entertaining it, making your own mind up about it, and coming to a decision and say, well, for example, Patrick is saying something to me, I'm taking that idea on board, I'm exploring it, I'm seeing how it fits, how I feel about it, and I actually like that idea, I like that suggestion, I actually want that to happen, and sort of boom, that's it in. That's it, sort of goes straight into your subconscious mind. Once that's allowed to enter, that's the change affected, that's it changed. Even coming with a mediocre kind of attitude of, I'm not too bothered whether I do or whether I don't, then it's very unlikely that there'll be any kind of change. The subconscious mind is still a bit lazy. It doesn't want, if it doesn't have a good reason, why would it change? Do you know, that kind of way? Why would it use the energy or the effort to do so? And so a very neutral attitude, a very negative attitude around anything, it just rejects these suggestions, even when that filter is sort of, I wouldn't say it's put to one side, I would say it would take on a new role, in the sense that if you imagine on top of courthouses, you would see, I think it's Lady Liberty you call this sort of statue that you'd see, and she's standing there with the scales, the balancing scales. And so rather than the judgment factor that it was before, where something comes in, it judges and looks behind and say, well, is there anything in the subconscious mind that matches this? And if there isn't, it's a blatant no, it's not happening. What this kind of filter does then, it does sort of move to sort of one side a wee bit, but what it does is it sort of balances anything that does go on. So it could be somebody's maybe self-image. They could imagine themselves as always thinking that I'm always going to be maybe this overweight, I'm going to have this difficulty in my life, I'm always going to kind of feel this way, whereas bringing about a new sort of understanding to this part of the mind and exploring it a bit more and presenting it then to the mind, or presenting it sort of at this filter, where it now balances it up and sort of it's looking at it and it's sort of weighing it up. So I know in the subconscious mind there is this sort of image, but then there's so much going on. So imagine it is something to do around sort of managing your weight. And there's an image in there that's like, look, I've always kind of been this way. It's always been really hard. It's been really sort of hard work. I get success and it doesn't typically sort of last long. Whereas a new suggestion then is being presented as, look, the reason why we're trying to present a sort of new image and to create it as good and solid and as strong as we can is that, you know, health isn't on this person's side. This person has actually come for the help, and they're looking to sort of change that aspect of themselves, get a hold on their weight, take back control and things like that. And so this suggestion is being presented in such a way that, you know, here's the option. If you keep going like this, you know, for another sort of maybe 5 or 10 years, maybe another 30 years, depending on what sort of life scope you could give somebody. You know, the average people lives now to 90, so even 100 now, I would say the statistic is. You know, if someone was to carry on living to sort of that age, is there a higher chance that they'll actually get that way? And so that would kind of change the motivation on a very sort of unconscious level, because its intention is, well, I actually want to stay, keep going for as long as possible. And so this new information being presented, if it's actually weighed up and balanced and it goes, well, actually this actually makes more sense, then it's actually looking at it and going, well, actually this makes more sense, and it'll actually allow this in, and it sort of boots the old idea, that old image out. And that change again happens very quickly. Once that idea has been taken, and the idea that I like that suggestion, I want it, I feel okay about it, and there's no other sort of negativity around it. There's no other secondary reason why someone wouldn't have this change, and that's something to look out for. So for sometimes people, there's a thing called secondary gain or tertiary gain, and I'll talk about that in another video. But basically, when a suggestion is actually being presented, here's the information, here's new information, rather than it just being blatantly rejected because it doesn't match what's in there. It's new information being presented in this nice space of, well, does this make sense? Is this going forward? Would this be a good idea to do it this way? And so once that's accepted, then that's it sort of locked in, and that's the reprogramming done. The truth of it is, hypnosis is 100% consent. 100%. The consent is needed by that person. You know, there's no, even though I could wave like a magic wand and say, look, is this what you want? And I would wave that magic wand and present that. At the end of the day, I can't make someone do something that they don't want to do. Nobody really can, and anybody that sort of pressures anybody in that sort of side of things, there's a feeling attached to that, and that's manipulation. And by no means I would imagine anybody in the sort of mind coaching kind of business, or resolution with people, you know, anybody working in the fields of counselling and things like that, these people generally, they're not there to manipulate. They're there to, yes, understand a person, see what a person's needs are, draw on resources that maybe that they have and ideas and present it to the person, but at the end of the day, the change cannot be made unless that person consents to the other party, and it's kind of like a teamwork kind of a job. You may feel manipulation when it comes to maybe salespeople that are just not doing it right. You know, people know when they're being manipulated or being duped. It won't happen. It doesn't happen. Your own protector within you will automatically, any suggestions being made, it will reject it. And there's a few maybe fears and phobias around sort of hypnosis itself, as I've already explained, some things that's been in the media, through sort of movies and things like that. But the only real thing that would hold people back is a fear, or the feeling that they don't have the control, whereas it's 100% consent by yourself, and nobody can make you do something that you don't want to do, especially in this kind of an environment. You know, and the only other thing then would be a fear. And so I'm going to address a few of these now, and hopefully wrap this up a wee bit soon. So the idea then, and just to finish this wee bit off as well, that idea of a suggestion being presented to the mind, if the slightest thought is there that change, that you don't want that change to happen, it won't happen. It just won't pass that sort of gateway, that threshold, that filter. It just won't. And so the key is, I like this idea and I want this to happen. This is what I'm here for. And the change can happen very, very fast. There may be other aspects of it they tidy up at maybe another time, or they reflect back on, but the main sort of idea, or that journey, or that pathway to get to from how someone would come in looking for a wee bit of a change in their mindset to actually delivering, or them actually being that embodied person of what they would like, their idea of what they would like to be, and resolving everything in between. It is a bit of a process, but it has to be taken at everyone's own individual pace. And so what one person could do in one session, it might take somebody else 2 or 3, and that's okay, because that's what makes people themselves unique. And so I'll go through these fears now. Some people would have a fear that, and it's rightly, some people would say that they have no awareness, or they're not alert. You're actually more alert in a more trance-like state. Your protector part of your mind is always on. It's always looking out for something. It's kind of like them brake lights coming on in the car when you're driving the car. The very second that happens, or any sort of red flag appears, then that alerts someone to actually sort of take action or make a new response if it doesn't match the pattern of the habit, or the automatic kind of program side of things. Again, you're not asleep. Although it is very relaxing, and it's a very conscious sleep-like state, in the sense that the relaxation felt is very, very deeply relaxing. It's not sleeping. You need the sort of two sides of the mind to sort of at least interact, and as a whole, so the conscious kind of mind is engage in that sort of filter, engage in sort of what the conflict kind of is, because somebody may come in with an idea of what they think something is, and logically and rationally it makes sense, but then the subconscious may present new information, a new insight that would just take a whole new spin on it, and it's, well, how do we resolve this? And then, that's it resolved. A person's attitude, again, it's, if some people think that it won't work for me, they are correct. If you think it's not going to work, then you'd be wasting your time and your money investing in anything at all like this. But I would urge somebody that is in that place to spend a wee bit more time exploring it, looking at different people's sort of ideas on it, looking at a wee book, a couple of YouTube videos, listening to maybe a couple of podcasts on different aspects of the mind, or mind coaching, or different sort of methodologies. There's CBT, there is NLP, there's like hypnosis as in the clinical kind of side of it, and just in a very reflective place. Does this match what I think, or does this make sense? What does this mean for me? And attitudes, it's key. Some people would have a fear then of their divulged secrets, like a family secret, or some kind of something that they hold very tight to themselves. And so there's lovely processes that can be used that are sort of content free, and that sort of sense is that the other party, if it's done with another party, doesn't need to know what's actually going on. There'd be sort of questions that are asked that not necessarily leading, but they would be to gain a picture of if are you in the right place? Is this where you're feeling this feeling? Is this where it's stemming from? Do you want to tell me what's going on? And somebody can quite rightly would say, well, no, I don't want to talk about it, but I want to move on. And so then the process will go in a very content free kind of side of things. People can actually lie in a very trance-like state. There's no reason why people can't. You're in the imaginative mind. It's not very strong evidence in the court of law. For that reason, it's simply presenting a suggestion to the mind to give the information, but how that information then is fed back and what filters that comes through, then it can't always be kind of trusted. And so people just won't divulge anything that, again, if it goes against their morals, their ethics, their belief system, their sort of, I don't like what's being said, so I reject that. It comes back down to that. Whereas the opposite is, if you take that attitude, look, I want to resolve this, I'm here for this, I want to resolve it, we'll go through this, we'll do a few exercises, and hey presto, it's resolved. And then there's another fear then about stage shows and things like that. Stage show hypnosis is actually very similar in any kind of state. It's very showman-y, and so it's all about the how it's presented. And so in a stage show kind of way, or in a street hypnosis kind of way, it's very deliberately enacted in the way that it looks like the guy or the girl that's actually doing the sort of hypnotizing side of things, that they have control over that other person. Breaking down the mechanics, it's the exact same way to induce hypnosis with someone on the side of the street or on the stage show. There might be different techniques used, but the breakdown is the very, very same. It comes down to looking at suggestibility, engaging people's imagination, people actually complying with it, so anybody that would comply with suggestions on a stage show kind of thing would be typically people in the audience that have actually maybe imagined that their hands are actually glued together. And even though my hands aren't glued together now, I'm telling my mind that these hands are glued together, and it's taken on that belief, and no matter how hard I pull at this, it believes, it's convinced, even though I consciously and logically know there's no glue here, it's convinced that this is locked. And so people engage in certain activities. Typically that's a very one that you'd see a lot in stage show, is imagine your hands getting locked together, glued together. And so that shows suggestibility. It shows how well people can engage their imagination. And then when they're asked to maybe come up on stage or something like that, if they don't comply with that suggestion, it means that they don't want to be up there, so they're going to reject that. And so that's why maybe 60 or 70% of the audience may comply with this side of things, but when the next step happens, they don't want to do that, and so they reject it, and everything unravels itself. And so typically what you see on a stage show is the people that are up on the stage want to be there. They're up for a laugh, they're up for a carry on. Some people would imagine these people, or describe these people, that they would probably go up anyway if they weren't sort of hypnotized. Yet their behaviour that they display on the stage wouldn't be in their character, in the sense that if the guy or girl makes them pretend that they're chickens, which isn't really one that's used very often now. But if they're up Irish dancing, or forgetting numbers, which is kind of a nice kind of one. It's, you can create certain temporary amnesia states where people can forget a number. So one you might see typically is, if you look it up on sort of YouTube and things like that, you'd see people that would forget the number 7, and then the guy that's supposed to have all the power is asking questions like, well, how many wonders of the world is there? And the person would genuinely answer number 8, or typically 6, or maybe another number. They would count how many fingers they have, and they would count up to 11. How many days of the week, and a different answer. And then simply by throwing in a new suggestion that all that information is being restored and clicking the fingers, then it's restored. It's simply just a suggestion. So there's loads of fun things that you can see that can actually show people the power of their mind. And so people that would do very well on a stage might not necessarily do well on a one-to-one kind of setting. Whereas the opposite can be true the other way about. So somebody that would come in for one-to-one, very happy to do so, very into their own personal development, then the same person, if they were asked to go on stage, just wouldn't do it, because it's not in their sort of moral system, their ethics, goes against their belief system. And they just don't want to be sort of seen in that way. And again, that goes back to sort of self-image. So it's fascinating, yes. Do they have control over the person? No. Is it portrayed that way? Yes, definitely. It's a show. It's supposed to be done that way. Anything else, you're going down the road of sort of manipulation and strong influence. And so they're professionals, and so they can set up a scene in a good way. But it's fascinating. Yes, you can see it in other sort of aspects of life as well, where people sort of are induced on the sort of like a trance-like state in a very similar way, but for very different sort of reasons. Sort of meditations is one way of sort of doing it. Sort of religious ceremony is the same kind of thing. It's there's the ritual involved. You could argue storytelling there, and you could argue sort of setting up certain compliance, getting people to do certain exercises, and the repetition of doing them things, even coming back repetitively to do the same actions. It sort of puts people in a more open, suggestible state. For whatever that reason is, it's not to be sort of controversial, but that's it's opening up the mind, and opening up the mind opens up the person, that kind of way, and it can be involved in a very sort of prayerful way. It's opening up the mind and setting intentions and things like that, and it's very, very, very powerful. But again, it's looking at the organisation around it, the intention, and what the sort of real motive and intention is there at a sort of bigger level. And so success rate, it really is up to the person, the individual. The information that I provided to you today is sort of a good glimpse into a very, very sort of big subject. I could talk probably all day about it and ramble on, and I probably have already in this, but the idea is just to give certain sort of ideas, sweet insights, and how you can affect change that can be a longer term kind of thing, and what ways it's done, the sort of some of the mechanics behind it, how much it does depend on the person. So someone, like, it really is, and I've said it a few times, if you do think you can and you think you can't, that's definitely right. There's a few people in history have said it. Henry Ford, the guy that does cars, I think it's actually one of the Stoics actually said something very similar along them lines. But it's really the attitude. Are you willing to do this? What's your reasons for it? Exploring this. Is it to save sort of time, rather than doing it on a longer kind of process? Is there a certain image that you would like to be, and this would be maybe a path of the least resistance for you to explore? For other people, it could be a different way. They might go down a road of exploring sort of the ritual and ceremony kind of things to engage the mind in such a way to bring about the person that they're sort of calling upon. So thanks very much for watching and listening. If you do have any questions, please do let me know. It is good to sort of, it's good to, if you're thinking about going in for do any kind of sort of change work, mind work, anything at all like that, just to explore how the mind is. It would be good to watch it maybe a couple of times, or look at other versions of this kind of thing. It's called the model of the mind, the theory of mind, and see what resonates for you, because that's the most important thing. What works for you? You are your own best expert, and all other people that are the professionals in this sort of space is help you bring out the best of you, and what way that can be done. And some things may be presented in such a way that it might not make sense at first, but on reflection, upon looking at it, exploring it a bit, without any judgment, without any sort of agenda, only for would this be a fit, does this serve, does this make sense for you, and rightly so. The response saying yes or no is quite right. If someone says, well, no, that isn't sort of the direction, then it's like, well, where do you feel it's more at? And it's simply wee signals, and how close can we get down the right track to get someone where they feel more at ease or okay with themselves, in a sense that they're on track for whatever the journey may be. And it may not even be on track, it may just be coming to understand themselves a wee bit more, and just being okay with that in the moment. There's no right or wrong. Again, let me know. Thanks very much for your time for watching. I appreciate and value your time for watching it. And so if there is any comments, any emails being sent across, I will do my best to get back to everybody as quickly as possible.